What is going on, everyone? Anthony here, and welcome back to another video here on Let's Talk Resident Evil. And in this video, we are going to be talking about some Resident Evil leaks that have been going on for Resident Evil 9 via playtest information. So a lot of this stuff has come from a source that playtested it, and then they also disclosed this information to Andy from Biohazard Declassified, who is a good friend. We all know him in the community. He is a good source of information, but whether or not the source that told him this information was telling the truth, that is going to be up to you when you hear this information. Obviously, these are all just rumors, leaks. Nothing is officially confirmed. We haven't seen an ounce of footage, screenshots, logo, nothing for Resident Evil 9. So at this point, all we're doing is looking at leaks, speculating, seeing what's happening with some of this stuff. And again, just take this with a grain of salt and don't put so much faith into this, because some of this stuff might not even be true. And I'm not saying that, some people are more credible than others, but sometimes when you're getting information via a playtester, you never know, especially when there's this much information coming out from a playtest. In fact, we haven't even found out if this is first or third person yet, which is something that is an obvious glaring issue within all these reports. Is why hasn't this playtester told us what perspective this game is in? Are we just supposed to assume third person because Shadows of Rose was only in third person? Little things like that make this a little sus. Now, again, I'm not going to say that this is something that, is completely false. There could be some, fragments of real stuff in here and some fragments of completely false things. So I myself have been covering leaks on this channel for a while now, since the remake era started. And there's never been a problem with me doing leak videos before. There's never been an issue. It's always just been, okay, these are the leaks. Let's talk about them. Let me kind of break some of this stuff down and give you my thoughts, right? And just not simply saying, this is fact. This is what Resident Evil 9 is. So we heard about all the playtests that happened in April and September. We talked about Jill and Leon being the main character. We talked about this being connected to the Mega Mice seat, but we have some more information here that we are going to get into right now. So I'm going to discuss some of these, and we're going to get right into it, and just let me know, of course, your thoughts down below after hearing all of these leaks. So the April and September playtest, right? Jill was in the April playtest, according to these leaks, and this takes place in an abandoned hospital on an island. So we know that Resident Evil 9 allegedly is going to take place on an island. And she's looking for the cure for the Megamycete infection for the people that are living on the island currently. And of course, the previous leaks also mentioned something of an infection going between Jill and Leon with the Megamycete. So whether or not she's also there to look for a cure for the people that are already there, it says that it kind of leads into her getting infected at the end of this playtest here. So in an abandoned hospital, so the mold-infected zombies apparently carry weapons, very similar to the Ganados or similar to the enemies in Village, where, they call them zombies in these leaks here, but I'm picturing them as more of like Ganado-type enemies with weapons and such. It does seem like this is taking more of a Resident Evil 4 approach, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. Now, would I have liked to have seen zombies come back in their true zombie form, like Resident Evil 2 and 3 Remake, where they're not carrying weapons or anything like that. It's just straight-on zombies. But it seems like from these leaks, they're more like Ganados than anything else. But they're mold-affected. So, again, kind of continuing from the storyline from Village. So Jill had a pistol, a shotgun, knife, a first aid spray, a couple herbs, and she can also craft gunpowder. So the crafting system is very similar to what it was in recent Resident Evil titles, which is good. I think the crafting is, has been perfected, especially in Resident Evil 4 Remake with the crafting menu and everything like that. So I'm sure it will use some of those mechanics. Jill is apparently pursued by what we're referring to as the Goat Man, which is a stalker-type enemy, and it's an enemy that can't be killed, but only stunned when fighting. So it seems like for both Jill and Leon, if this is the case, allegedly, that these are going to be stalker enemies. I'm going to get into Leon's stalker enemy in a second, or a pursuing enemy throughout each, part of the story. I don't know if it's going to be through the entire game. But it looks like the Goat Man is what's chasing her around in this hospital. So in the last leaks that we talked about, Chris Redfield and Barry Burton are both back in this game, but more as supporting characters, so not on the complete front lines, at least as of yet in this playtest. Chris Redfield radio calls Jill during this hospital segment and lets her know about the Megamycete, letting her know that this can make you hallucinate. It does have that effect. We did see that in Resident Evil Village with House Beneviento specifically, and there's a couple other examples, but that's really a big one. So hallucinating apparently is going on throughout this hospital segment, and the Goat Man bioweapon must be taken down in order to have some of these effects settled. So it might mess with Jill's psyche as she's trying to battle these enemies. But Chris also mentions that the use of Rose's blood, which contains mutamycete antibodies to create a vaccine. So while she's there for possibly the residents of people that are living there, this is also going to play into, I'm assuming, what's going to be the cure for her and Leon if or when they get infected by the Megamycete. Again, this is all allegedly from these leaks. So apparently Barry also calls Jill in this playtest and talks about various weapon options to go over to fight the threats in the hospital, which is very, strange for Barry to kind of show up in this capacity to just be like, oh, use these weapons, Jill. But if Barry and Chris are on the sidelines, so to speak, as supporting characters, I'm not completely mad at it. I just hope that we get some kind of, section where Chris and Barry have to actually step out and help Jill or Leon. I think that would be a really cool scene personally, but we'll see if any of this is true. So we talked about last time in the leaks about the moon that they're worshiping, that these enemies worship the moon. And all throughout the hospital, there's a red moon with a infinity symbol. And that is apparently what they're worshiping, is the moon. So you have all the logos very similar to the insignia logo in RE4 Remake, and the various logos of the house leaders and the houses that we saw in Village. It was all over the place. So it's one of those things where they're kind of going back to very similar themes that we've seen before with this, whether it's a cult, whether it's enemies, worshiping one said thing, worshiping the moon in this case on this island, and apparently it's all over the hospital. And Jill's segment from this playtest ended with the Goat Man winning a fight against her, so probably knocking her out, and apparently infecting her. And that's where her playtest ended. So whether or not a lot of this information would come from a playtest is also something that I think a lot of people find a little suspicious about both these April and September playtests that allegedly took place. From what I remember when we got information, legit information from Resident Evil Village playtests, it was very minimal. It did not go into this much detail. We got enough detail to kind of see what it was going on, but we got that it was at a first-person perspective, that it was dealing with a, wolf-like creature, that it was that whole segment where the guy gets grabbed through the house in the beginning of Village. It was that whole section. And that's why some of this stuff where it goes into a lot of this detail makes it a little suspicious to know why this playtester is giving this much information. And would you even get that much information from a playtest? No. We haven't even gotten the perspective of what this game is. First person, third person. This guy can give us so much information, and he gave so much information to Andy. And again, this isn't on Andy. This is just, an observation of what this playtester is saying. This guy is also on Reddit talking about stuff and everything. So seeing what he is, commenting on these threads and saying in some of this stuff, it's just like, why can't you just say the perspective the game is in? Because I think for a lot of people that is important, right? But anyway, so that's the first part of the playtest, some more information on the April playtest. Now let's get into the September playtest, which is going into Leon S. Kennedy. So 2 characters, 2 different playtests. What is this game going to necessarily be? Is it going to be a scenario system? Is it going to be, you do play as both characters, it just changes perspectives in different parts of the game? I don't know how they're going to manage this. I doubt it's going to be co-op, so I think it's going to be a little bit more streamlined. But with Leon, he is getting a little bit of a different taste of horror, so to speak. Now, in the September playtest, which stars Leon, it took place on a beach at night before heading into the forest located near Mr. Simon's laboratory. Now, Mr. Simon is allegedly the villain, the main villain in this game, that is cloning Evelyn. So that's the thing. He is making clones of Evelyn in this lab, and again, the Megamycete is basically being, farmed out of this island, right? Keeping it alive. Now, Leon's objective is to locate the lab and find Mr. Simon. In the process of going through this island section, but apparently Leon encounters zombies with axes. So what I think this is here is not necessarily zombies. It does feel more like Ganados from RE4 is where it's leading. Now, unless, I'm completely wrong and Jill deals with more Ganado type enemies and Leon deals with more traditional zombies, but it makes it seem like they still have weapons and have these chants, these worships that they do to the moon. So just from that alone, seems like all around this game is having more RE4 type enemies, which I'm not necessarily mad about. I don't hate the Ganados. I just think that when you have these types of enemies, the horror can be sacrificed a little bit depending on what the other BOWs and bosses that they have throughout the game kind of present, right? Because some people can look at the Ganados and say they're completely terrifying, where a lot of people like us who have been with Resident Evil from the beginning might still find them terrifying, but might be longing for more traditional zombies that we got in something like a Resident Evil 2 remake, which I think would have fit perfectly with an RE9 scenario. But that's just my opinion. I still wouldn't mind Ganados, don't get me wrong. Don't get it twisted. I just want to see some kind of variety, them make it a little bit different. You know what I mean? Even with zombies, a lot of people can say, it's been done before. Been there, done that. Let's keep it in this like RE4 remake kind of vibe, or even Village type vibe. But, I digress. But apparently Leon does make comments and states that this does remind him of the Raccoon City incident. So I don't know if that's like a direct reference to the zombies specifically, because if anything, he would talk about how it reminds him of the Spain incident in Resident Evil 4. So I don't know where that comes from or if that's even true. Apparently, Leon is chased by a witch-like woman who cannot be killed and turns into flies and evaporates when she disappears. And Leon experiences hallucinations still, very similar to Jill, but sees like dog-like creatures who can't be killed. And Mr. Simon taunts Leon through a loudspeaker, similar to Heisenberg in Village. Now, I just want to say right here, I'm not a fan of this witch stuff. I'm not. It's not Resident Evil to me. You know what I mean? And so, allegedly, if this is the case, I'm probably not going to be a fan of this enemy or boss or whatever. I wasn't a fan of Mother Miranda. I wasn't a fan of the house leaders. It did not really feel like Resident Evil. You know what I mean? It just kind of took me out of it. Now, I do like the Ganado type enemies, like that's fine. You know what I mean? That seems a little bit more grounded. But very similar to Village. If it is similar to Village, it just doesn't really do anything for me personally. So I think that this is a little bit of them kind of going too far out there again if they do implement like witch type stuff again. And I wasn't a fan of any Evelyn stuff either, as far as like how they handled her and, how they handled stuff in 7 and 8 as far as like the overall picture. I like the Bakers. They were a little bit more grounded. They just kind of got caught up in, Evelyn's evil basically. But I don't know. I just don't really think that some of this witch stuff really creates the Resident Evil vibe. So I'm kind of fearful in how, if this is true, how they're going to do that. I don't know. But Leon also sees zombies praying to a large moon near a bonfire on the beach. So these zombies are definitely more Ganado or Village type enemies. At least that's what I'm picking up from all of this here. The playtest apparently ends with Leon ending up at a Blue Umbrella / BSAA base. So maybe we get more squad members that appear. Maybe we get more of an explanation as to what happened to the BSAA at the end of Village. Why did they have BOWs on a helicopter? What happened? Did they get corrupt? Like, we need an explanation from some of the stuff that really did kind of leave us hanging at the end of Village, because they were so focused on other stuff that they were trying to wrap up. They kind of left us scratching our head with some of the stuff at the end of Village. But them worshiping the moon, I mean, it's something where they're really trying to kind of tap into maybe the cult-like aspect that we saw in Resident Evil 4. So I'm not completely mad at that. I just think that some of the BOWs and enemies really do have to feel a little bit more grounded and more like they belong in Resident Evil. So that's my biggest fear, is that they just get a little excited and kind of go all over the map. Now, it says that Jill's hospital section is apparently at night. It's very dark with screams of infected, various labs in the hospital that remind Jill of Wesker's experiments, and specifically the experiments that happened with her as well. So kind of going back to the Umbrella Lab vibe that we had in previous Resident Evil games. Leon's beach and woods playtest, that was the area in which Leon was, you know, kind of exploring, and you had the light from the moon shining through the trees, and it really did create a atmospheric approach according to this playtest. But we'll see how much of a horror vibe both of these scenarios or both of these character segments really bring to the table. Now, this next part is a little strange and a little weird, and I don't know how much we can really get into this without just saying, oh, this is completely BS, but here it is. So the witch that we talked about, which again isn't very RE in my opinion, apparently it tries to seduce Leon. Yes, seduce Leon with moans and screams. I don't know. This is what the playtest says. This is when it gets into like, are you fucking serious? Also, how much of this information would be in a playtest? I mean, it doesn't really make much sense, in my opinion. Trying to seduce Leon, I mean, she's going to seduce him faster than Ada could seduce Leon. I mean, what is happening with some of this stuff here? If this is the case, again, I'm not very, like, fond of them kind of taking these leaps. I wasn't very fond of some of the leaps they took with Village and some of the stuff with how they wrote it. So I think, you know, you have this director coming back, and I know he's not going to be like the sole writer of it. I don't believe. We don't really have that information yet, whether or not he took part in, you know, specifically writing this, the director. Again, he directed Resident Evil 7. He directed Revelations. So I don't doubt that he, you know, will do a bad job with directing it, but whether or not the story really stays in the lines of RE has really yet to be seen. We're just going off of these alleged playtest leaks. I don't know if that's actually going to be the case with this witch lady trying to seduce Leon, if that's her goal. The goat man for Jill has horns, apparently, and a huge mouth on its stomach. So I don't really know whether or not that kind of plays into, again, the creatures we're going to be seeing, the BOWs we're going to be seeing, the other variety of enemies. And the goat man has a large axe, which we've seen characters with large axes before. But yeah, a lot of these leaks, again, the detail that they go into is just very, very sketchy. You definitely want to take these with a grain of salt and definitely just, you know, sit back and see if we get any official word on Resident Evil 9 soon. Once we see a trailer, we could start kind of putting the pieces together to see if these are in fact real, or some of them are real, or some of them are fake, or everything is just fake. I mean, that's why I want to just make these videos and kind of take a step back, look at them, kind of break it down, and fill in the space that some of us fans are kind of thinking while we're reading this, instead of just like making a quick video and not really going into detail, because I think with some of this stuff, you can only go so far into detail with what these alleged leaks are. But I want to approach this with a logical standpoint of like, does this really feel like a main installment of Resident Evil and not just like a spinoff, which is what 7 or 8 could or could not feel like depending on the person playing it, because the stories just kind of feel more like isolated stories away from the main characters and the main story that we know and love. So this was their chance, or this is their chance, to really make us feel like this is a main installment of Resident Evil again, with a story and characters that really are familiar with the player. But also, you could still implement new characters. I'm not completely against that. But if you're going to do all of this and have all these characters in here that they're saying, Chris, Barry, Jill, Leon, I would expected the actual like substance of the story to not feel so out there of what we know in Resident Evil. So that's my only thing. I just, Do I still want RE9 to be successful? Absolutely. I want the story to be good. I want the game to be good. But if you're going to bring back our OG characters to the mainline games, which has been kind of more like they've been in the background of 7 and 8, Chris specifically, right? And we finished up the Ethan Winters stuff. I feel like this should have been more of the RE vibe of 7 and 8. 7 definitely brought things back to basics, scaled things down to a house. The bakers were very effective, right? They scaled it in a way where it made sense. The only part of 7 that kind of fell apart, in my opinion, was the whole boat segment. I thought the pacing of that was just horrible. But again, even 7 had a more grounded approach than what Village had and what this has, if these leaks are true. And I think that shouldn't be the case. I think you should make 9 be a little bit more scaled down, very similar to 7. Realize that some stuff in Village didn't work, right? Some stuff gameplay-wise did work. I thought the gameplay and the gunplay was very well done. I thought the Duke upgrading system was obviously emulating the Merchant, but it worked very well. You could do those things, but just don't make it so out there to where it doesn't really have the RE vibe. And then some would say, well, they lost the RE vibe years ago, so on and so forth, right? There's fans of all different pockets and eras of this franchise. So however you feel about this is your opinion. But all in all, we're not going to know anything about Resident Evil 9 until we officially see a trailer and officially get a press release from Capcom. So I'm going to hold my opinions to myself as far as like an official how I feel. But judging from these leaks, I mean, it seems like it's going to be a Resident Evil 4, RE4 remake type story and presentation, which isn't bad. I'm not mad about that. I'm just hopeful that our characters that we apparently are going to get in here are true to themselves. They are the characters that we know and love from the previous games. They feel like the characters, and what they're put up against hopefully feels more like Resident Evil than what we got in Village. That's my hope. So far, some of these leaks have me scratching my head, and I'm very like in the middle. So let me know what you think down below in the comments. Again, these are just leaks, rumors, so take them for what you will. But let me know what you think of these recent leaks down below in the comments that we could discuss further. Don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe, and stay tuned as we cover more leaks and there's more content coming right here on Let's Talk Resident Evil. Take care.